We're about a minute behind. Just give me one more minute to pull up YouTube and then we will officially convene. Thank you. Morning. Thanks for being so patient. Today is Tuesday, April 15th, 2025. It is tax day. And this is our meeting for the Budget and Finance Committee. Welcome aboard. So I call this meeting to order now at 9:02 a.m. If you're able to physically rise, please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Again, good morning and welcome. My name is Christine Novello. I'm a governing board director. I'm the treasurer of the governing board for this fiscal year, and I am therefore the chairperson of this meeting. I welcome my fellow members of the Budget and Finance Committee. We have every member here today, so we have a full quorum. If you're new to Budget and Finance Committee meetings, please go back to our video of September 3rd, 2024. That was the first meeting of this working year, and we introduced ourselves at length at that point. So if you'd like to know more about who is on the committee and who's speaking, that's a great resource for you. Moving on to 1.04, I'll give you a quick overview of our meeting procedures. The governing board and its committees conduct all their meetings in compliance with Arizona Planned Community Association open meeting laws per ARS 33-1804 and in concert with RCSCW bylaws, policies, and standing rules. Parliamentary procedures, as outlined in the most recent edition of Robert's Rules of Order, will also be followed in all meetings as appropriate, consistent with Bylaw 3.07, Procedures for Owner-Member Meetings, and Standing Rules number 2 and number 3. So with that, we'll move on to our minutes, 2.01. Are there any changes, corrections to the minutes from our committee meeting of April 1st, 2025? Okay, seeing none, by consensus, those are approved. Move on now to new business. In our last meeting, we reviewed in detail the proposed CIP, and we've already made our recommendations to the governing board in that regard. The governing board is considering all of that capital budget now. So item 3.01, we do not need to cover that at this point. We will move on to 3.02, proposed fiscal year 2025-26 annual financial plan. Mr. Swan, take it away.
Thank you, Director Novello. Good morning, everyone. I don't know if it's an omen or not, but our first meeting in April was April Fool's Day. Our second meeting is tax day. So I don't know. This is a little. Well, I guess I'll get started. All good. That's right. It's okay. Excuse me. So when we talk about our annual financial plan this year, our general manager, at the direction of our governing board, was tasked with putting together a strategic plan. So this budget has 19 of the 40 or so items in terms of deliverables or objectives in our strategic plan. And I just want to call that out because it's very important. It really is kind of driving, tactically what we do in our budget in terms of not just doing our day-to-day running of the association and management of the assets, but also and the services, but also with that, strategic plan in mind. And and that's incorporated into this operating budget. So I wanted to call that out. And this is something we'll talk about as well at our community forums presentation of our budget. Make sure the community knows that there is strategy involved in this budget. It's not just getting up and doing what we've always done, but we're trying to make things better. And again, you know, that strategic plan incorporates all of our services, and to do those, we have to have two budgets as part of our annual financial plan and operating budget, capital improvement budget. So for our operating budget, we put together this summary of executive summary of our budget this year. So this is what will be presented at the governing board as well before they vote on the budget. But the expense assumptions are listed here, and we've talked about these and justified these and presented some data and information, the proposed assumptions for those proposals. And so they're listed here. And again, we've talked about these in depth. Our rates and to help increases to help cover some of the increased costs that were listed on the previous slide. These are the proposed rates to cover those expenses. And it's important to note that, you know, our service levels, the services, the amenities that we provide here really haven't changed in 40 years. We're really essentially providing the same services as well as the service levels that our members have become accustomed to seeing. The cost to provide those services, evidenced by inflation every year, go up. We know that. And so if what we're providing hasn't changed, the service levels that we're providing are there or at or better, we have to make sure that doesn't say that we don't look to do things more efficiently, but we know that costs go up to provide the types of services that we provide here. And we're not providing one service. It's not like we're just providing golf, or we're just have a membership department that collects our annual dues, and we got a couple of parks that, you know, with some playgrounds on them, and we got to replace the wood chips in the playgrounds, rubber around the playgrounds. There's a lot that we manage here. There's a lot of diverse amenities, diverse expense structure, things that are subject to inflation, things that are subject more to inflation than others. But you know, we have to manage those costs. And it's not just as simple as saying, well, let's just go in and hold the costs the same. Or let's figure out how we can just manage this one thing and prevent an expense increase. There's a lot of opportunities to do things more efficient, which we, as managers, are always looking at doing, and we can always do better, and we strive to do that. But the fact of the matter is, the cost of things go up. So these are our capital assumptions with APFs, and then our reserve fund allocation from member dues at 7.5%, keeping in mind that industry average is 15 to 40% of your member dues go into your reserve fund. We have the APFs that help us really subsidize that amount that we take from our member dues to go into our reserve fund. So we're able to provide the amenities that we provide, the vast amount of amenities that we provide back in that wheel, that circle with all those things in it. We're able to provide all of those services and only ask our members to contribute 7.5% of their dues and fees to cover our reserve fund, because we have our APF fees that help us do that. Really a luxury and for the community, really is. And again, anybody that pays an APF fee coming into this community is buying into something that's just amazing, and is buying into something that our members that have lived here for multiple years have been supporting for multiple years. We feel like it's a great compromise, and it should let the person know that what they're buying into is something special. And so with that said, with this budget, we have 8.1 million in cash inflows, and that's coming from 5.9 million coming from APFs, 1.2 million coming from our member dues, 981,000 coming from our reserve fund, and that 8.1 million will fund our capital improvements that are budgeted for this year at approximately 5.9 million. And so that'll create an excess for us to our reserve fund to help us cover those items that need to be repaired and replaced, and keep us at our FFB percent at least 40%. So the projected reserve fund inflows and outflows for the next 5 years are presented here, and essentially with the $2 million inflow from 23-24, it's about a wash ultimately. So you'll see our beginning reserve fund balance at 28 million, and our ending reserve fund balance is 28 million. Pretty impressive. That's with 53 million in capital improvements, which are the reserve fund outflows down here: 10, 6, 13, 4, 13, 7. Approximately 53 million in capital improvements. So pretty impressive. You know, what tells us, how do we know that that 28 million is a healthy number? Well, we look at our fully funded balance percent, and our FFB does drop to 41 and 42%. We feel like this is a conservative modeling, so we'll be talking about some things in terms of the FY12 and our reserve fund policy, which will help bolster that, which isn't modeled in here, and could positively impact us in our future planning. But 41, 42% with 3 irrigation projects in it, pretty healthy, pretty substantial. Again, surrounding communities, you can see with our dues and our APF fees and what you get for what you pay for, and the type of amenities that you get for what you pay for. It's not just the amenities themselves, but the condition, the service levels, unmatched for under $600, a very good value. And if you roll that over per rooftop, because we do bill per member, it's about 1.7 members per rooftop. So if you took the 598, multiplied it by 1.7, that's approximately what we're getting per rooftop. And again, none of these communities are listed on this top 10, 55 communities in the U.S. by Retire Better Now. Sun City West isn't. So again, the bargain, I don't want to say bargain. That's up to interpretation. The value that you get for your member dues is top 10 in the country. And that concludes my presentation budget.
Thank you, Cliff, for that. Again, we have the budget forums that are coming up, I know, on the 23rd and 24th, as I recall. But what are the next steps for you and the team? We reviewed this in detail at our last meeting. I don't see any major changes, unless I missed any, correct? So in terms of, we'll go through and make sure that everybody will, and allow the community to ask questions and so forth. But what are the next steps that you see in terms of reviewing the proposed financial plan?
Okay, so a potential change could come from our governing board meeting on Friday.
Right.
The governing board is going to vote on, of that approximately 5.9 million in capital improvements, they're going to vote on what's going to be incorporated and proposed in the annual financial plan on Thursday, excuse me, thank you, on Thursday. So they will vote, and it's, at this point, everything has been, the only pullout or the individual item that could potentially not be included based on I mean, ultimately, they still have to vote, but based on the governing board workshop would be the 300,000 for
Right.
website redesign.
This committee identified the only pullout. All the other committees and every other governing board member was satisfied with the capital budget as proposed. So we, as a committee, pulled out or identified for examination the technology line, the 300,000. Everything else is included in the inclusive vote that will be taken on Thursday.
Yes, and that's a new item. So if we did not budget for that, that would impact the reserve fund positive.
Understood. And as for the financial plan, the operating budget, what are the next items that that you're looking for feedback? I'm going to ask anyway, but are you looking for specific feedback from this committee on any of the items contained within the operating budget?
Not looking for any, but I'm certainly happy
Open to it. Yes.
Respond to any.
Understood. So that being said, in our last meeting, we combed through everything in a lot of detail, all of the assumptions underlying this. And again, Cliff has, again, given us an overview of where we stand for the operating budget itself. So we'll start, we'll do a quick round through the committee, see if there are any outstanding questions or concerns or comments that we'd like to make. So we'll start to the viewers' right, to the audience's right. Mickey, if you could start us off, please. And again, you don't feel compelled to say anything, but if you have a comment, insight, question, please.
I am completely satisfied with the budget.
Thank you. Jim?
Just one trivia question in regards to running with these big dogs, in regards to the communities. Are we the oldest?
I don't know what the average age of each community is. These are 55-plus communities.
Yeah, no, I understand that, but we're.
Oh, you mean as far as how? You know what? I don't know the answer to that. We may be.
I think many of these are the latest and greatest. But
That's
yeah,
a good point, though. Yeah,
to be running with the big dogs like that. Yeah,
to be 47 years old, absolutely.
yeah.
Testament to
The previous, yes.
and the
Yeah, that would be a great insight to have and to add for all of us. Great question.
Other than that, I'm good. Thank you.
John?
No questions. It's a good budget.
Chris?
I have a couple questions I think will be easy for you. First of all, since we've seen the budget proposal, we've always had an estimate of minimum wage of 50% or 50 cents rather. Is that hasn't changed? Is that common? Is everybody who's doing a budget in Arizona looking at 50 cents? Is there a leading indicator that tells people that 50 cents is the right number?
cost of living is the leading indicator. So in terms of the COLA and inflation rate, that's probably the best indicator. Last year we had a 35-cent increase. So we conservatively budgeted 50 cents for the minimum wage increase. But a lot of, like, for example, even the associations and nonprofits, a lot of them have a December year end. So in September, they find out what the minimum wage increase is. So they have that luxury. Fortunately, we do not.
And I asked just to make sure that unless something dramatic happens, we're probably not going to get burned with a double that or 1.5 times.
No,
or
I mean,
something
you
like
never
that.
know when somebody wants to, put a petition together to get something to be voted on. Like last year, was 18 an hour. We were staring down the barrel of, but I think we're safe this year. I haven't heard anything of anything like that coming up.
Okay, I have another question. When we're talking about our fully funded balance and maintaining 40% or higher, what's our total estimated price tag for the water conservation project? I feel like, I'm seeing 5 million here, and I forgot how many million. We've got another one in a couple of years. I feel like as a community that we've so accepted that we don't realize the incredible impact it has on our fully funded balance. So what are we looking at in total, ballpark in total?
Is it 43? So we've got Stardust, Pebblebrook, Then we have our 3 desert courses. We've got 5 more. And we're in the middle of ECHO, which is our second project. So the regulation courses are 7 million, call it. The executive courses are 5, 6. 5
Yes,
million, call it. So
So we're in the 30, 40,
30, yeah,
$40 million
yes.
that we have to spend, and we can afford to do that. Not easily, but we can afford to do that, but that's an incredible impact.
Absolutely. It's, and it's, you know, ultimately, it's something we would be reserving for anyway, because it's infrastructure that has to be replaced. We don't have a choice. Now, there is mandates coming from the state that are also pushing it.
Right.
But at the end of the day, our irrigation systems are assets, and those assets have a life, and we have to reserve for them. The fact that we have 7 golf courses is really driving the fact that we have to spend that money to replace that infrastructure, flat out. Just like these stadium chairs, everything else that we have, an asset that has a life on it, has to be replaced. Todd's got some details on the exact. I call him the Todd father. I mean, he has everything. I mean, he is the Todd father. He's just the best. And like, he didn't even have to be here today, but he's here, and he's got all this information like right at his fingertips. So Echo is 5.5 million. Stardust is 5.5 million. Pebblebrook is the at the time we have to do these are all inflated, and they're all cost estimates. 8.8 million for Pebble. A lot of grass, large course, and then some challenges as well with the type of what we have to work around and things like that. And then we start our desert courses. So you got Trail Ridge at 4.4. You've got Deer Valley at 5.9, and you got Desert Trails at 5.1. So if you exclude Echo, what we have to approve moving forward, you got 5.5 or 14, call it 18, or about 28, 29.
In today's dollars, right? For the most part.
Those are
Projected.
Projected dollars.
Projected, okay,
Yep.
thanks.
Yeah, and my point being that that's a heck of a punch in the gut that we're able to handle, which
Yes,
is
and
which
the
is incredible.
beauty of those is they go from 35 to 40-year assets to 70-year assets. So we're getting twice the life on it. So the reserve fund impact is going to be half of that, of what it is forward, and an ultimate savings because the type of materials that we're using. And all those sprinkler heads come with 10-year warranties. So in terms of sprinkler heads, we're not replacing sprinkler heads for 10 years, and we're repurposing those old sprinkler heads that are still good. So it's a beautiful thing, and there's a lot of operational savings in there. There's some increased operational costs because now you're taking care of desert instead of just putting someone on a mower and mowing the grass. So it's a little more expensive when it comes to that. Irrigation, you're checking a lot more irrigation because you got all these little drip lines going all over the place. So, but ultimately there is an operational savings, and then it creates an opportunity with our water rights down the road to potentially lease some water rights, which would be a new revenue stream for this association. So, which could decrease dues.
And again, these are awesome opportunities. I think if I'm hearing you correctly, Chris, what we're noting here is that because we've studied, the reserve study and all the work that's gone into projecting this, this is not something that was taken us by surprise. It has taken some of our neighbors more by surprise because they've chosen to not run things the same way.
Yeah, so you could spend all kind of operational costs keeping an old irrigation system going if you want. Yeah, instead of fixing it or replacing it when it's due and life has been bad.
So costs, It costs money to save some money sometimes. It's a line from Moonstruck, by the way. No, sometimes in this case, looking ahead and planning prudently, right now, we are experiencing the benefits of a lot of the great decisions that were made by boards and employees before us. So, Chris, anything else?
Yeah, unfortunately, I do have one more. And this is from the budget package. So when I read this, I like to try to, make sure I understand it.
Okay.
I feel like you've described this once or twice before, but I'm looking at special events, and I'm looking at it under Recreation Division, which it looks like an income of a large amount under Recreation Division. And then I look at it under Sports Pavilion, it looks like a negative revenue or an expense.
Yeah.
First, I want to understand, what should I be thinking about? What are special events, right? Do we make money on special events? Just by looking at this sheet, I feel like I understand everything else throughout that package, but that kind of confuses me a little bit.
Great question. Yes, so special events are an amenity to the association, to our members. So when we report special events, we report the revenue received minus the costs for the event, not including our payroll. That's down in an expense. But we report that as gross income, which is just hard cost minus the event. So we always have an event staff. We always have a scheduling staff. And also built into that are the free events. So anytime we put on a free event, all the costs for that free event get offset against the revenue as well. So that's a gross income for our events. So we do all of our free events, and we present, and all the events that we sell, we generate $200,000 to $250,000 a year. So that is an amenity that provides a positive cash flow to us, and it's reported up there. The reason it's reported as a negative in the Sports Pavilion is because we don't charge for those events, so there's no offset to that expense in the Sports Pavilion. It all rolls up into events on the main, so Sports Pavilion essentially is at a cost because, yes, we get more patrons in the bar, and they buy more beer and all that, but we don't sell tickets for those, so there's no offset in Sports Pavilion. So it shows as a, that's why it shows negative in there. But ultimately, that's then rolled up into events. So you can take the negative amount in Sports Pavilion, subtract that out of the total amount that's budgeted, and that's really what the events department is generating in terms of gross.
So the special events, at the end of the year, looks positive as far as revenue. It looks positive, not just as far as revenue, as far as net, right? It's a positive net, but not counting our labor and expenses that are offset under general expenses.
Absolutely. So we have facilities assistants and janitors and things that we pay for anyway for our rec centers. And then we'll have additional costs for setting up an event and tearing down an event. And then we have staff that coordinate those events in the events department. So, which we would have anyway because we're coordinating free events. So just think of it as it's an amenity that we're able to subsidize and add a positive cash flow to help subsidize dues.
And I guess I raised the whole question because I could not tell from the budget package. I couldn't deduct our cost from that. I have a hard time determining whether we're making money off of this or losing money off of our special events. It's hard to actually pinpoint from this documentation.
Right. We don't have a separate division for events. It's not. It's an amenity with our it's part of our recreation, really. So.
And our goal is kind of a break even?
Nope. Our goal is to provide the best events that we can for the association, and if we can subsidize that, we'll maximize what we subsidize. There's no there's no operational dollar amount that's a goal. We don't manage the association that way. It's not. This isn't a for-profit business. We could.
But
That
that's
would
not how
really
we do it.
drastically change how we would run this facility. If that was our objective, special events is no different.
I mean, I understand, and I think you answered my question by looking at the budget package. I just can't tell. It looks like a positive inflow,
It's not,
but there's costs that offset that,
right.
and I just don't see them lined up.
Yeah, so exactly. I mean, we have a divisional P&L for golf courses, but we don't have a divisional P&L for pools. Okay? We don't have a divisional P&L for library or bocce or mini golf. We don't have P&Ls for all the amenities that we provide here. Events are an amenity, just like those other things. So that's the way it should be looked at. It's not a profit center for us. We don't. If that were the case, we probably would run that differently. We would bring in different acts. We would charge more money. There's a lot of different things we could do if we wanted to make that some sort of profit center, but we're trying to provide that amenity to the community with the resources that we have here, and then show that as, here's how much additional incremental revenue that this is providing to the association, that already we staff, already we clean bathrooms, already we do. That's why we report it that way.
Cliff, you, at the governing board meeting, you presented, it just might be helpful for anybody who's here, Chris and others, governing board meeting, you actually broke down, just for illustration, some comparison of how you can, I don't even call it value, but you actually looked at, valued how much of a, value we're offering for some of our amenities like pools, right? So versus golf courses, right? So per golf course, per pool. It might be interesting to take a look at that just to get a viewpoint on this is how our association has historically been funded and run. We have a lot of amenities that we offer for our fellow members, owner members, and these are among them. So really nothing, even including the things like bowling and golf, where we do have some offsetting revenue, these are amenities for the members who use them. So that's how it's been priced historically, and that's how these divisions run today. Whether it's right or wrong, it's something that we've been doing, and that's how this budget package. It is, though, to your point, it is hard to pull some of these things out. That's why we're here asking the question. So
Yeah, it's a great question. Like I said, the free events, the Munchie Mondays, the Cinco de Mayos, the things that get put on, those are also incorporated into that gross income that's reported on the top line of the income statement. So we're paying for all of those events, as well as the events that we charge for, to a positive cash flow of $200,000.
So some of, I'm looking now, I'm sorry to interrupt, gentlemen, but a couple of the folks who are watching online are really having a hard time hearing you, Cliff. And my apologies to those who are trying to observe online. I didn't see that until just now. So, so for those who are online, I don't know which parts of the presentation were hardest to hear. We'll get to your questions, though, momentarily. So thank you. Anything else, Chris? I'm sorry, I was looking at David.
I'll just, thanks for the explanation. I understand it. When I read that, I read it as almost defensive for the Rec Center Association, because I could see somebody reading that, saying, look, you guys make a lot of money off these special events, right? Why are you charging 15, why not 12, or something like that? And again, just the paperwork doesn't directly say, no, hold on a second, this is an amenity, we pay for it with staff and such. It's just hard to read it that way.
Yeah, no, yes, and I'd be happy at a BNF meeting or even a governing board meeting to do a presentation on some details into, we actually did it last year in the budget process, but some details into what types of events are budgeted, what the costs for those events are, the hard costs, and also what are the You know, what are some labor costs that could be allocated to that? I would say as a whole, the analysis last year, it was about a break even.
Yeah, that's the, I don't know if that's the right way of presenting it or not. In other words, if we need that, but I think what's important is for us to be able to show and express to our owner members that we try to do the right thing and we try to do it the right price, you know? And again, that just caught my eye in the budget package. But I thank you for the explanation.
Welcome. Good question.
Thank you. David?
No, I just wanted to thank both of you for that discussion. I think it was really helpful and valuable for us to have a broader view upon what we are doing here to provide amenities to our members of the community. So thanks for that discussion. I have no questions or any changes I would recommend to the budget. I just think it represents a really comprehensive process that we went through, which is valuable to our members that we've done. And if you followed any of the video on YouTube, you would see all these steps we have gone through to get to this point. I look forward to 7 years looking at the next review of the golf course's capital and budget, so we'll wait until 7 years from now.
Don't wait that long. Let's watch it every single meeting and every single year, but thanks. Rick?
I just want to make sure that you told us that all the projects that are included in next year's strategic plan have been implemented and the costs associated with achieving those are built into this year's budget.
For the deliverables for 25-26, yes.
Okay, that includes all the training, all the development, all of the associated costs with going in and out of the strategic plan. I just want to make sure because I don't want to come back next year and somebody say, well, that we didn't achieve that because we didn't have the resources associated with it. It's built into the budget, so we do have the resources available, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
To your point, Rick, though, it's something that Budget and Finance and the board and the community need to keep an eye on because the deliverables after next year will not be, those are not going to be small amounts. So we need to keep an eye on this as it develops and continue to participate. Good question. Ed?
No, I think all my questions have been answered, and I think it was a good process and feel happy with it.
Thanks. Some of the things that we've talked about, though, again, the committee is far from released from our responsibilities on budget. Just to remind us, Cliff alluded to this, the governing board has yet to vote on the capital, much less the operating, right? So we could come back in our subsequent meetings and still be deliberating changes, just to give us that heads up. And also, there's a lot of opportunity to improve the budget process. We've talked about it as a committee. We've talked about it one-on-one. Just realize that before we end our working year in June, if you will, we'll have the opportunity to talk about some potential improvements going into next year as well, or at least that's my vision. So with that, we do have several questions online, but I'm going to prepare the folks who are here in the audience. If you do have questions, come on, you can start lining up at the lectern for those. I also want to make sure that we are aware some of the things that have come up. If you're here and you were not able to participate in the governing board workshop last week, my fellow director, Jolene Piaskowski, who's here, and I'm not just saying it because she's here, but she asked a great question because there's a lot of misunderstanding and misinformation floating around. These things happen about the strategic plan. The strategic plan and that we've undertaken, this is a one-time cost, right? Including the things that are proposed for, some of the things that are proposed for next year could be more when we're talking about technology, but we're talking about kicking off the master plan. That is a one-time cost. So please, it was a great question. So thanks again to my fellow director who asked this last week, but just please question some of what you're hearing from your fellow members and come to the sources and ask those questions. We're happy to clarify. So with that, I don't see anybody at the lectern. I'm going to start taking questions from those online. again, one more time, I offer apologies. I guess you were having, the folks who are online were having some trouble hearing early on. If there's anything you need us to repeat, please type that in to the chat boxes when you can. Gary Bach, 135435. There are a number of questions here, but I'm going to give you one at a time, give us one at a time. I believe there are several positions that are unfilled and have been unfilled for some time. 2 questions. Number 1, what are those positions and the cost of those? And number 2, can those positions be eliminated to save on costs? This question has come up a number of times, but please, Cliff, if you could address it for us. It's a good question. I'm sure it's one that others have.
Okay, yeah, so we have 490 positions. We have a large, 2/3 of our employees are part-time. We do have turnover in positions, so there's always, anytime we don't have a position filled, there's always a savings to the budget. There's also additional burden put on existing employees when there's an employee missing. And so therefore, it could result in extra overtime, it could result in extra hours for part-time, it could result in, may need to pay for those services outside services. So built into this budget, we do budget full employment, but we know that, first of all, the prudent thing we feel is to budget full employment. We budget what we need. We can get by with less. That doesn't mean that we're providing the services at the service level that we've budgeted, and ultimately, we don't want to manage our business by not doing that. So yes, there could be some savings. There probably would be some savings in wages, but there will be some expense increases in other areas, and what happens is just work, projects, maintenance, things get kicked down the line that have to be done later on. So I'd like to be able to stand up here and say I can budget it exactly the way I know it's going to roll out. I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't have the ability to do that because I don't know who's going to be coming and going. But I do budget based on the hours that are worked annually. We do have a yearly annual number of hours that are worked. So I do put a budget together based on that.
A follow-up first, please. One of the things that when you presented in earlier meetings, you did mention there have been examples of times when positions have been eliminated ultimately, not necessarily to save on costs, but out of a realization that we could either do the work differently, outsource it, or that the position may not be. Tell our residents and us, or remind us again how, when we put together that budget, or when you put together the budget, how the positions are looked at. Are they just rolled over year to year? Do you examine each one for, as you're proposing a new budget, do you examine each set of openings to ensure that they're still warranted?
Okay. So the services and the service levels, first of all, provide the FTE need. We don't just say we have a job description, therefore we need to hire somebody. That's not how it works. We have the services, the amenities, and the service level. That is the driving force behind the FTEs. Now, we put together job descriptions for positions that help us accomplish those goals. And in our budget process, we meet with each department head, sometimes down to the supervisor, depending on what department, and we meet with those department heads and supervisors and look at the hours that were worked in the prior year, the positions that are vacant at the end of the year, and we have those conversations with the department heads. And do we need this position? What types of hours are we looking at? Is there a need that we need to that has created a business need for us where we have to change a position? We do that annually, but we also do that as we're going through the year. There are times when we realized that we could take 2 part-time positions, and it makes more sense to create a full-time position, or create one part-time position, or take a full-time position and bust that out into 2 part-time positions. So there's things that happen throughout the year that we do. We've eliminated positions throughout the year, saying we're not going to fill this position. We've added positions based on directives from the governing board, from committees, needs from clubs. And there's all types of moves that are made throughout the year within the operating budget to accomplish the goals that we need. So it's not as simple as just this and that, and then we're done. It just doesn't work that way, because we have to manage not only, I mean, again, like I talked, we have a diverse amount of services and things that we provide here, and various business lines that require, management, supervision, day-to-day just grunt labor, oversight, planning. There's a lot of different things, and at the same time, we have to create an environment where we want to keep these people. We have to create an environment that gives them the ability to grow, and so we can, like I said, keep our people. We're not, turnover rates stay down. So within this budget, that's what we try to accomplish. And at the end of the day, if there's a savings created in payroll, that savings ultimately feeds the reserve in terms of excess. And then that is incorporated into the budgeting process as we look at our fully funded balance and our fully funded balance percentage in future budgets. Okay, so that's how it's done. If I talked at the governing board meeting that if we do not increase dues, if we say that we can take $5 off a dues increase, that's $140,000 a year. In the modeling, we're at 41% in 28-29. We lose 4 years of $140,000. It's pay me now or pay me later. I mean, it just is. That's just the way that it is. And we know based on inflation that costs go up. We know that. So we have to model and plan, and for under $600, and I just, the value, what you get for the amenities that you get here, it shows that historically we have planned right, budgeted right, good shape, and we're not overfunded by any stretch of the imagination, but we're right in the sweet spot that we need.
Thanks, Cliff. Again, we're not trying to question that. I believe the question was, can positions be eliminated? And my follow-up to you was, do you review those every year? What I'm hearing is yes.
But there was also in that question was for a savings. And
yes.
That's what I was addressing.
Yeah, no, I get that. I totally get that. I just wanted to recap. Thank you. So I'm going to ask our sound engineers here to make sure that the volume of the speakers' microphones is adequate for our online viewers. We're hearing reports that they really cannot hear. So please just check that when you have a chance. The other thing I'm going to remind our online viewers is I'm going to direct you to the governing board standing rule number 3, rules for meeting conduct. 3.1.2, speakers shall state their name and member number and speak in a courteous manner. Mr. Bagnato, this applies to you online as well. I understand you're frustrated, but I'm going to read your question nonetheless, but please, sir, let's treat each other as neighbors and colleagues, and thank you for that in advance. Mr. Bagnato's question is regarding the library. How much of the funding comes from Friends of the Library, and how much comes from dues?
Okay, so the library, I presented this previously, the library has a $150,000 operating budget that comes from the 501c3 Friends of the Library. So they provide books and materials, as well as not included in that operating budget is volunteer hours from staff at, I think it was 23,000 hours 23,000 hours a year. So we do have a staff at the library, so I think the annual payroll cost of the library is about 300,000 in the operating budget. In addition to, well, from the association. So that comes from the association.
I hope that answers the question. If there isn't, please feel free to post a follow-up, Mr. Bagnato. Any other questions? Oh, Chris, I'm sorry. You did have a follow-up earlier, and I neglected to come back to you.
Yeah, this was about the open positions. And the this might be better directed to our general manager, Stephen, or Kristen, our HR manager. But I've always thought there was a lot of questioning about open position, but I always thought that having a time to fill metric with maybe an extreme would be very helpful, because when we have, 400-ish type of employees, we're going to have open positions, right? If 5% of our positions, just by turnover, and we will have some open positions, but to me, we can define those positions by pointing out that maybe one position has been open for a long time and we can't fill it for whatever reason. And then that kind of like would pinpoint our focus on towards those positions. Do we need that position? Not the fact that you report X amount of dollars or X amount of positions open. I think it would be helpful to have a metric like that so that we can say, we've got 20 open positions, but we fill them in 2 weeks or a month or whatever the number is. We are struggling with a couple of positions. I think it'd be real helpful for everyone.
Yeah, we do present that data in our operations reports. Our open positions are presented in that and reported in our GM Ops presentation. So we do present those positions. We don't ticker them in terms of the time that they've been open. I will say probably the most challenging positions we have, not probably, for a fact, is on our golf course for our greenskeepers, and then our janitor positions, night positions.
I just think it'd be helpful to consistently report that and help everyone understand what's open and what are temporarily open.
Okay, we present what's open, but we don't ticker them. So
Thanks, Cliff. Any other questions from our residents here or online? Any other questions from our committee? Yes, Rick.
Cliff, I've done this almost my entire career in budgeting, and what you've done is when you have open positions, you need to fund those because that supports the service level that we offer our residents. It's work that needs to be done, and it needs to be funded, and that's why we fully fund it, fully operational from a FTE standpoint. So we need to understand that work still needs to be done, and we need to support it because there's costs associated with it. And that's what we're doing here.
and that's our objective as well. Yeah, that's our objective. Now, you can look at the timeline of FTEs. I mean, they do change. Moves are made, decreases are made, adds are made. So that there is a process there. There's movements within departments, plus and minuses, which have been presented. It's being managed. It's being managed, but you're correct. There's this, I call it want versus get by. I mean, need versus get by. This is what we need. We can get by, but you're just kicking the can down the road on those things that aren't getting done, or that those levels of service aren't being provided. And we're not once have I had a general manager been directed to come to me to say, hey, we really want to just close down rec centers,
These are just these are just theoretical points you're making. I don't think anybody's talking about closing down rec centers, right?
Not once.
Okay.
Not once have I ever been directed to put a budget together that reduces amenities or service levels. Now, we're directed to do it efficiently, and that's what we do. But to your point, yes, the The budget's put together based on the needs to do.
And Cliff, I didn't mean to interrupt you, nor, I was trying to make a little bit of a light point, right? The other thing is that, in my experience, the direction, there's not been any change in direction to change our budget to alter our amenities focus. So we continue to budget for and allocate funds such that our fellow owner members are able to enjoy all of these as amenities. So just so that we're aware, we're just re-stressing. I have another question that's come in online from Gary Bach, 135435. Cliff mentioned if we reduce dues by $5, there would be a reduction of $145,000 to the reserve fund. But wouldn't it be only 7.5% of that, since 7.5% of the operating budget goes to the reserve fund?
It's a great question. Ultimately, the excess from operations goes into the reserve fund. So it's $140,000. It's not just what is earmarked to go into the reserve fund. Then the operating income in terms of the total operating income is $140,000. So the total impact is $140,000.
I hope that answers the question. Thank you, Cliff. Any other questions from our residents? Jim?
I guess the one thing, you kind of poked on the hornet's nest a little bit. And I've said this a gazillion times, and I'll say it, you know, the dues and the APF fees are a finite resource. And it just seems like those are the primary go-tos, and obviously they're sensitive to the owner members. I'm not convinced that we leverage our assets to their fullest revenue income opportunities. Prime example is our events. Yeah, I looked at it too, and I was going to harp on it way back. It looks like a wash. I mean, I realized that there were costs that are buried in the operating budget that don't get called out on there. I was kind of surprised the other way around. I was surprised that there wasn't more income out of that, or why we don't offer some high, like you had said earlier, we could have some higher end acts or performers or whatever. The Stardust Library is an example. It just seems like that thing is just sitting there collecting dust, and I don't know if there's opportunities to bring in. I just think that's an unleveraged opportunity, for an examtle.
Yeah. So the theater is not collecting dust. There's a lot going on at the theater.
In regards to generating revenue.
Oh, well, but we're servicing clubs and with that as well. So it's not looked at as a revenue generator for us. It really isn't. Now, there's some opportunities that we might take advantage of, and we're always looking at different things, but it just becomes a matter of we're trying to provide amenities here at the association. Really, that's what we're set up to do. We're set up to provide amenities to our members. We have the ability to subsidize some of those amenities by charging additional fees for them. And there's a balance there. There just is. And it's not as simple as just saying we're going to put a P&L together to make this. It just really doesn't work that way in our world. It just doesn't. I worked in that world for 20 plus years. I know exactly how to do it. You build a margin, you build a top line, you build a margin, and that's what you present. Absolutely. That's not how we're geared to run. We're just not set up that way.
My one last comment is it bends my mind why we have something that we dump $43 million into that doesn't print money. We operate at a loss. on purpose. And that just makes no
It's
sense.
an amenity.
At least at this point, Jim, speaking for myself, I'm sorry to interrupt
Yeah,
you
no
here,
worries.
but we've said collectively that we need to find more revenue opportunities and resources. That's a big part of the strategic plan thought. How we're going to do that, I think, is still up for discussion. But you're raising a valid point today. That's not been the direction, right? It's not been the historic direction of the governing boards prior, and it has not been the direction, therefore, of general manager who receives the direction from the board and the team. So they're operating under the direction that's been given, just to be, fair to them. So as that changes and evolves, I think that, again, great points. Where can there be more revenue opportunities? I believe that's something that we'll be looking at in the following year. Is that fair to say as well? I mean, right now, everything is, using the example of the theater, just to be really honest, I asked the same question early on, right, about is that available and would we ever consider it? Today, it's just not set up to be a revenue-generating type of opportunity. Will we change that? Well, we'll have to see, right? But today, that's not how any of our amenities are designed. These are designed to be for the exclusive use of our owner members and our occasionally invited guests. That's the phrasing that we use. So I hear what you're saying, just we
Okay,
do need to find more revenue opportunities in addition to those that we have, and thank you. Anything else, Jim? I didn't mean to, I just wanted to offer my input on that.
No, I just, yeah, that's just not, I'm sorry, and no offense here, but
No,
when
no offense.
that's just not the way we do it. That's not an answer. Again, these folks are you're in a 55 and older community where people live on fixed income, and you're projecting all of these with every year forward from here on out is going to have dues and APF increases and projected every year. And I'm okay. I understand. I get it. I've seen the bigger picture, but here again, there's opportunities, there's fruit on the ground, and I'm hoping that with the new board, the new general manager, just look at it from a different lens and see if there's opportunity out there.
Thanks, Jim. And, we have a strategic plan, and now, assuming it's funded, we'll have a master plan that will look at what's important to current and future residents. So it's something food for thought. I don't see any, I believe that was the final question we had online. Any other questions in the room? Well, then, hearing none, more to come from, as we get more direction from the governing board. We'll be back in future meetings with updates, if necessary, on our budget. So thanks, Cliff. Move on to item 3.03, everybody's favorite stuff, policies. But the working group that has been assembled has been working for most of this year, has been looking at both our investment policies, and I grouped them together for the working group. So they were looking at both policy FY04, which pertains specifically to our reserve fund and reserve study, and FY12, the investment of those funds. So so I'm going to look to Mickey and Rick in terms of policy FY04. Your recommendation, I believe, is that FY04 is fine as it stands. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Any concerns or questions on policy FY04 from the rest of the committee? Jim?
You can always count on me. As I reviewed it, I was kind of wondering, I had some questions that kind of popped out at me.
And this is pertaining to FY04, correct?
Yes.
The reserve fund policy.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, sir.
First question is, capital asset. Is there a definition of a capital asset in regards to dollar-wise?
Yes, it's $5,000 and a 5-year useful life.
And I guess it'd been nice to, that is not spelled out. It's just capital asset is just used loosely, and it doesn't really give a description of,
These are the policies, remember, these are the overall governing policies that are the what, not the how. So capital assets are defined by generally accepted accounting standards, as I recall, correct?
Yeah, but they're laid out in FY1, I believe.
Oh,
What the-
thank you, even better.
the capital is. There's a policy around that.
Okay, go ahead, Jim.
well, I just see that the word capital assets is laid out quite, and I would just, yeah. Bullet point 3.1, stating that the insurance policy requires that the governing board ensure that adequate property, casualty, liability insurance be maintained, blah, 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 blah. I was just wondering, why do we not have the GM and or the CFO and or CFO included in that? Why would that just be on the governing board to ensure we're adequately covered?
Five. These are all they're all interrelated, right? The governing board just, again, we're setting up the what, so we want to make sure that these policies all pertain to the governing board really, and how we relate. So we just want to ensure that the governing board is making sure that we are providing this insurance and that it's adequate. So it's just part of we've been going through, the Budget and Finance Committee has been going through this all year. We look to ensure that each of our insurance areas are adequate. I believe the P&C and liability insurance presentation is coming up in May. I can't remember the exact the date of that, but we'll be seeing that and reviewing the next year's renewal. So it does fall to the governing board to ensure that policies are maintained and that they're not lapsed. May 20th is when we'll present
P&C
that.
renewal information. And the operations does ensure that we have proper, adequate insurance. It is upon us. The governing board isn't going out to bid and doing all that, so it is. Okay.
Any other questions on the existing FI04? So I'm entertaining a recommendation from the committee that the FI04 be retained as written. Actually, as I recall, I believe we have to do these by voice vote. So we'll start with you, Ed. It's agree or object would be what I'm looking for to that. So retaining FI04 as written, agree or object.
Agree.
Rick?
Agreed.
Agree.
Chris?
Agreed. Agreed.
Jim?
Disagree.
You object.
I object.
Thank you. Nikki?
Agree.
Thank you. So, we will forward this, and thank you, committee. We'll forward this to the governing board as is. We'll move on to any comments or questions from our residents here or online. Let me check. Nothing online? Excellent. So moving on to 3.04, which is more substantial in nature. We have printouts here, and thanks for that. I'm going to introduce this. Again, this was really where we've been spending the bulk of our, the working group's time has been spending the bulk of our time on this through the whole year. We've all heard and received and are in total agreement with the presentations that have taken place already in terms of the nature of the proposed change that we're endeavoring to make. So what the working group took on was my direction and the governing board's direction as well, to make as few changes to the policy as possible for this, the reason for that direction was not that we have any sense of, we always want to do the best job that we can do. But this is such an important policy to us and to the community. We did not want to bury the key changes under an ocean of red ink. So what we wanted to do was just highlight the key changes and not do a substantial rewrite of language, right? I just want to make sure that all of us on the committee and all of our residents understand where that direction came from. So there's a lot of thought and discussion that went into this in all of the working groups, but we'll start off overall. One of the things that we, the working group and the advisors struggled with a bit was how to entertain one of the key items. So if you look here at item 2.1, goals and objectives, much of this policy really remains as written, right? That we invest prudently and so forth. But one of the key things that we needed or felt we needed to reflect is this viewpoint of maintaining a consistent strategy. Constant change to the investment strategy costs money. This is the association's investments. So we want to build the muscle of understanding the nature of that. So we built that into section 2.1. And you can see the changes, by the way, are highlighted in yellow and blue. I'll explain the difference in highlights in a moment. The red items and highlighted in yellow, we're re-highlighting everything to ensure anyone with a vision color correction problem is able to identify where to find these. So in section 2.1, the key changes here is to understand that we're talking about a strategy, not a program. We want to ensure that we are building in the language that it's overall consistency. So we built in the words lasting as well as consistent and prudent to the approach. And at the very end of that section, the specific goals remain, as you can see, untouched. Preservation of capital, liquidity, and rate of return in that order. We've added in the language with an overall mindset of maintaining a consistent strategy. So I'm going to pause here and I'm going to ask the committee, first of all, working group, anything else that you wanted to add in terms of the language that was added, color commentary, and why it was important?
Yeah, so no, what I will say is, so one of the things in any investment strategy is that it is important that you maintain a consistent approach. That doesn't mean that it can never change, but what we need is a strategy that is within a framework, a policy framework that allows us to invest over a lengthy period of time. If we make changes every single year to our strategy, that does not maximize our ability to invest for the long term. Now, we also can't dictate that no changes can be made. That's not what we are trying to do here. What we are simply trying to put into the policy is the idea that maintaining a consistent strategy is an important part of our policy.
Thank you. So any questions or comments on section 2.1 and those changes from the committee, please? Excellent. Well, we'll keep moving forward. It doesn't mean that we can't come back and reconsider. Just wanted to make sure we all understood. So the only other changes, or the bulk of the changes, I should say, are in section 3, as you would expect. These changes that are highlighted, this is the substantial changes that the working group has been talking about, that we as a committee have been talking about throughout. And again, remember the direction here is to highlight the key changes for ourselves, for the residents, the owner residents, because this is very important. So we chose to direct this working group to minimize language changes as much as would be prudent. So with that, Oh, I neglected to say, the items that are highlighted in yellow are the items that were changed or proposed changed from the working group. Anything that's highlighted in light blue, we had this policy reviewed by the association's legal counsel, and he made a few minor tweaks that are highlighted in blue as well. Nothing that changes the nature of the investment policy and strategy itself. So you can see, starting in 3.01, the committee, the working group, decided to call out some of those key changes and understanding that all of our funds are, how are they invested, and calling out this notion of short-term, medium-term, and long-term. So 3.01, the sub-bullets define each of those categories, and then subsequent sections below refer back to the same or similar language. We can speak through each of these if necessary, but I presume that most of us had the opportunity to see these. So just rolling through what the nature of those changes are. Sub-bullet to 3.01 in terms of the investment of funds are guided by cash flow requirements, and looking at each of those. We chose to pull out for us the fact that operating funds, this is what's being done, day to day. Those operating funds are really not part of the reserve fund. That is not what's invested by our investment manager, Cap Trust. However, just wanted to call that out because previous versions did not make that clear. So operating funds are only going to be invested in cash equivalents, short-term U.S. Treasury federal agency obligations. So again, and the working group defined our understanding of what cash equivalents and short-term U.S. Treasury federal agency obligations are. Any questions and we reuse that verbiage over and over again. So let's talk now. Any concerns or issues with the examples or the definitions provided? Jim?
In regards to cash equivalents and short-term U.S. Treasury and federal agency obligations, that's a statement. Then we have examples of it, and we're calling out commercial paper. Those don't relate to short-term U.S. Treasury or federal agency obligations.
But
Those are corporate.
so, but what they do, but they're part of cash equivalents. And so that's
not
what,
arguing that.
so that is what we are.
Oh,
there. It's commonly considered to be what are commonly considered to be cash equivalents. They're included in cash equivalents.
Okay.
That's the reason why they were.
Okay.
And one of the reasons that we called it out is that at times people don't understand what cash equivalents are.
Yep.
So it can be actually can be just money in the bank. It can be CDs, but it can also be short-term commercial paper, overnights. It can be short-term treasuries. There are more comprehensive descriptions of cash equivalents, but we thought we would put in a few examples of what could be considered a cash equivalent.
Thank you. I guess my one question would be, why did we not include CDs in examples? I realize we're not going to lay them all out, but it is one of the low fruit.
We did not put it in. We didn't put it in because CDs and bank accounts are pretty easily identified cash equivalents. What we did put in are things that people might not think of. But it definitely includes anything that would be considered cash, which CDs are considered to be cash, as well as, as well as other cash accounts.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or concerns about that language? Good questions.
Christine, can
Yes.
I make one more? So one of the reasons, so then people might say, well, why did you take out backed by the full faith and credit of the U.S. government? Well, the fact of the matter is that U.S. Treasury and federal agency obligations, by their nature, are backed by the full faith and credit of the U.S. government. It is redundant to include that, and that's why we took it out.
That's an important, thank you very much for explaining that. Okay, well, let's move to some of the other sub-bullets. Again, it can get a little confusing, so that's why I just wanted to take this sort of step by step. So cash equivalents, short-term, et cetera, et cetera. So now we have this definition that we're going to reuse over and over again. So now let's talk about the reserve funds. So we talk about the projected net short-term capital expenditures. And again, that was defined under 3.1. And remember, all of these things, we chose to tie all of this to the 5-year financial plan. And we just spent an hour talking about the most recent version of the 5-year financial plan that Cliff presented to us. So we want to ensure that everybody understands we're not just, well, what's a short term? What's happening in the next 5 years? That's exactly what we look at every year. And that's the crux of our budget every year. And it will form the crux of how we define each of these pools, if you will, or areas of money, not separate pools. So short-term expenditures are invested in the same things: cash equivalents, short-term U.S. Treasury, and federal agency obligations, period. This is important to note, and I just in case someone's coming to this new, we've talked about it before. What this does is put into policy what our operating team has been trying to do and works on doing every year. So this is not new. This does not require any massive change. Is that fair to say? You've already been working on trying to manage to our short-term funds, right?
Sorry. Yeah, this isn't a big change operationally for us. We're operationally doing this. So yeah, we're just, like you said, we're just calling it out.
And the big change, I think, for us to consider are how we're defining the medium and long-term expenditures. So again, just rolling through those, and thanks, Terry, for rolling through before we open it up for questions. So we wanted to look at some of the instruments and how we define those. 3.1.3 defines the medium and long-term expenditures. And again, examples, same thing. We move to the next sub-bullet because in the medium and long term, that's when we can actually start looking at the open-end index, actively managed mutual funds, exchange ETFs, et cetera. None of that is different. We're just looking at how we're defining some of these and trying to put a little more specificity around that. 3.1.4 gives the, if you will, that's the money. If you will, that's what everybody's been looking for. What's the number? 3.1.4 says that all our reserve funds are invested in the range, right? And rather than making this up for debate, we're calling out the equity investment target is 25%. And you will recall that we agreed, or we've already talked about that 10% range, plus and minus. So this sets up the new target and a range for all the reserve funds. But remember that and the fixed income comprises the remainder. And remember that the equities and so forth are really only going to be applied to the medium and long-term funds. And we set up all of those amounts each year in that 5-year plan. So that's my overview. I'll turn it now to Minky. And to go through any of this in detail, and we'll open it up to the committee and residents for questions.
Most of you who are here in attendance have seen the multiple presentations that I provided. That was to lay out kind of the long-term perspective, and we did that. The reason that we did that is that we wanted to look at what are our short-term needs, what are our medium-term needs, and what are our long-term needs. When we look at those have, from an investment policy standpoint and investment strategy standpoint, your short-term needs really need to be highly liquid. And so we called that out. Highly liquid, so within the 5 years, and it's modeled out in the plan. There are years that you take out of the reserve, years that you put in. What we're really looking at is in that 5-year period, what is the amount that you need when you put the inflows and the outflows together, that you will have sufficient cash available to fund your needs on a year-by-year basis in the reserve fund, your capital requirements. So we called that out because that really, along with your operating capital, that should be in short-term investments equivalent to your cash and cash equivalents and short-term treasuries. So we've called that out. That will be an amount that will be given every year and that we will know how much that is. That isn't the only amount that can be in cash and cash equivalents and treasuries, which we indicate later. But what we're saying is at least that amount needs to be very liquid so that it is available and so that you don't have to cash out more assets with more risk involved, right? So that you have that. So it doesn't mean that there is no risk, but we're really trying to minimize risk. That is what this is all about. Medium-term assets are those that we will need them in 5 to 10 years. So in that 5 to 10 year period, you can still have cash and cash equivalents, short-term treasuries, longer-term treasuries, and bonds of many types. But that's what we think you need in that bucket, is no equities. You can have more bonds in it, a little bit more of a lengthy investment profile, but those are appropriate for that middle bucket. We really called out that equities are only appropriate if you do not need the funds for at least 10 years. And that's what we looked at. So if you look at this, and we put our investment target at 25%, for equities, it currently sits at 10%. So it is a 15% increase. But if you look at what 25%, so 10% of $30 million, our reserve is sitting right around $30 million, plus or minus. 10% is $3 million. So you look at 25, that is $7.5 million. So it's $4.5 million more than where we are today. And when you look at that profile of this we need in 5 years, this needs to be available in 10 years, this needs to be available in over 10 years. That $7.5 million is well within, it is not needed for 10 years. If you look at the funding, more of it will not be available. So we still are trying to be very conservative in terms of that investment profile. Still very conservative, but really with a logic to it, with a plan around it, with definitions of what we want to use, and a real way to put those out over a period of time, and it allows you some flexibility. The reason we put a range in is if you have, so currently right now at 10%, the market changes every single month and we market to market every single month. Well, it goes over 10% and then it goes under 10%. So the range is to give you the ability to deal with market changes and not have to rebalance on a monthly or even more frequent basis. So that's the reason for the range. So really, this policy, and we've tried to make it as simple as possible without too many changes, really just tries to follow what we had outlined before, which is based on our reserves, this is what we need over these 3 periods of time.
Thanks for that,
Yeah,
Mickey.
Christine?
Yes, sir. Of course.
The other reason why we went with a range is that we're, like Mickey said, we don't have to rebalance on a regular basis, and it gives us a range so that when we hit 25%, that doesn't mean we have to rebalance. We have the ability to go all the way up to 35%, you know? So, so that's the good thing. And remember, these funds are the community's 401k and pension plan programs for the future. So this is the money that we're gonna need to retire on. And it's a retirement community, but we also have to start thinking about what's gonna happen when the community assets start to retire. And so we have to make sure we have the right money in place for that retirement also.
Right. And unlike humans who retire, this is a very long-lived, we're planning ahead as, with the hope and the expectation that Sun City West continues in perpetuity. And so, but yes, good points. Thanks for that.
Director Novello?
Yeah, of course.
One point that I liked in this presentation, or the reason I like the range is, to me, it helps us accomplish 2.1 also with the overall mindset and maintaining a consistent strategy, because it gives us flexibility to to manage these funds at different times of the market, which will give us consistency in our policy so that we're not so rigid at like we are now at a 90-10. We have some flexibility within that to manage the funds and not have to go to a policy change to do that.
That's true. We'll still maintain that similar target for those long-term funds. That's true. So, but yeah, all great points and great to remind us, because it's been a while since we were together and heard the presentations from the working group about this. So just good reminders as to what we're hoping to accomplish. And we're really, right now, if we could focus our comments and feedback and questions just on section 3 for now, that would also be helpful. And we will, of course, we'll entertain all comments and questions throughout, but let's take a look at that, at those key changes in section 3. And again, realize that we had a couple of late-breaking, relatively minor changes that were proposed from our legal counsel that are highlighted in blue. But hopefully between those, you've had a chance to take a look at these. So we'll open it up now for committee questions and comments. Jim, you want to kick us off?
Yeah. I guess under, well, let's start with 3.1.4, I guess. So there it says, all reserve funds shall be invested in a variety of fixed income and equities. Well, it's not all. It's medium and long-term reserve funds. It's not the short-term, correct?
Actually, that's not true, because short-term could be considered fixed income, right? The cash and cash equivalents. So we want to say that all
And
funds are
equities?
invested. No, we're saying, we're spelling out above the divisions, right? So short-term is only cash and cash equivalents. Medium-term includes some bonds. Long-term includes equities. Those are all spelled out in 3.1 above, right, in separate sections. We're just saying that all the reserve funds are invested in a variety, and we want to include this overall, the target of equity investment would not exceed the ranges provided with the balance in fixed income. So that's why we provide it that way.
Okay.
Is that fair, Mickey? I know, I'm sorry, I took that question. How would you like to answer?
Fixed income encompasses cash and cash equivalents as well. Oh, sorry. Yeah, so when we say fixed income, we are including cash and cash equivalents. What we're saying here is all of our reserve funds will be invested in a variety of instruments that include both of those types, fixed income, which includes cash, and equities. And we could what we could, I'm not sure it needs this clarification, but we could say, you know, as defined in the above, right? Something like that, as defined above, that might, so that makes it more clear
Yeah.
that it is, we have defined what the buckets are and how those buckets will be invested. This target, however, the target is based on the entire fund. So what we're saying here, rather than, there was some discussion about trying to put targets in each piece. Well, I have to tell you, that's actually impossible. It is, and it's unmanageable. And so what we're saying here is that the whole fund, so in my example, 30 million, no more, 25% is the target for equities in total. All of that will be encompassed in the long-term piece, but the measurement is based on the total. And so that is what this piece was getting to, as opposed to, we're not really defining here, what the buckets are and how they'll be invested. This is simply saying they'll be invested in a wide range of instruments and the equity, and what the equity target and range is.
No, I understand. Thank you. I guess it might be just as simple as add and or, since we're including it all. It's all 5 buckets, and so we're trying to make it inclusive, that you can be in fixed income and or equities. So it's not just.
Yeah, and or, I'm not sure that that's, what do other people think? Does that make it more clear?
I like the idea of just as defined above.
As defined above.
Yeah.
I go along with that too.
I think that makes it even more clear.
Yep, I'll buy that.
Yeah,
I think that's a clarity
yeah,
that
I agree with
I could
that.
stand behind.
What's the process for who dictate how, and I know that this is the what, we're not doing the how, but how is that target established, and who, I mean, does it, you know, say we're at 15% one day, and how does it get moved to 35% on another day?
Well, the target is 25, the range of
I understand that,
acceptability.
with a range of 15 to 35. I'm just kind of wondering, is it all solely on our or portfolio manager discretion to move accordingly?
So if you look below at 4.2.1, so if we just go, it's right there.
Yeah.
So investments of the capital projects funds in the portfolio are managed by our professional investment advisory firm. However, and we've had discussions with them, there will be a process put together of how you transition to that, right? Because there is a transition, right? So there's a transition from the 10% that we're at right now to 25%. I don't believe that we have finalized what that process will be, but there will be a process that, and they will ask for input from our CFO and our management team on how that should be accomplished. And because the fact is that there's more than one way to do it. So there is do it on the day we decide, and it's done, right? So that is one way of doing it. A second way of doing it is over a period of time. And whichever way we go will be thoughtful, and it will not be in reaction to the market. That's what I can tell you. What I can tell you is we will not every month go through and say, or they will not say, oh, market's good, so we actually should do more. The process will be decided upon at the outset, and followed until the transition period is complete.
Okay,
Yeah, that's right. They,
Thank you.
they're going to be looking for direction from the team, including the governing board treasurer, together with CFO. Governing board will take that up. It's exactly, as Mickey outlined, that's exactly the choice that will face us. You know, do we want to do this all at once, or do it over a period of time? And they'll explain when this policy is considered by the governing board, they'll actually be in attendance, and they'll explain some of that then too.
Thank you.
Jim still has the floor, please.
Just one quick one on 3.1. It just seems like there's a lot of, for something so critical, I wonder if there's opportunity to put it in a table format of some sort to make it more readable, understandable, or leave it as a word salad. I don't know. I just seemed to me it'd be nice to have had it, and there's opportunity for clarity was kind of what I'm poking on.
Thanks for the feedback.
That's it. Thank you.
Rick?
I just want to clarify with Jim, this policy has been run through Cap Trust to make sure that they can implement and they feel comfortable with this policy, so that this isn't just we're springing this on them right now. They've had input on it all the way through, so.
And if it helps as well, they've looked at it, and once the policy's been agreed to and assuming it's approved at some point, they'll come back to us with an investment strategy document, I believe. Is that right?
Yes, they'll build their IPS on this policy, which essentially will say the same thing as the policy does, but yes, they'll build their IPS on that. And just going back to the transition, what they want from us is clear direction on how. They don't want to be, we couldn't just say to them, hey, just go do it when it makes the most sense. They won't do that because, and you can't look at the execution of it in a short window. You have to look long-term at what it looks like. So it's not just, hey, we made this move, what was the impact right now? Oh, that's the impact forever. It doesn't work that way. Just like with any investment strategy, it has to be looked at the big picture of what the execution of that is going to return down the road. So it's not going to be a managed thing where they pick winners and losers and then it just, you know, then we're left with a bucket of losers at the end that we're just sitting on. It's going to be done professionally, but it's going to take direct. Here's how we want you to execute it, and probably it's going to be a percentage every month.
Yeah, dollar cost averaging, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Jim. John, any questions or concerns or insights?
No, my question was answered.
Cool. Chris?
Yeah, sure. First I'll start by saying that I agree with Jim. I think the opportunity for 3.1 to be clear is definitely an opportunity. You know, when we talk about it, we use three terms. We use short-term, mid-term, and long-term, and they're in those bullet points, but they're parentheses at the end. And I think that it's hard to read for me too. And then there's a typo in the second bullet point from the reference of FY15. It looks like FL15 to me. Those are just simple comments. And then the other one, I have a question. If I understand 3.1.4, if I understand this correctly, because when I first read it, 3.1.4. When I first read it, I was a little bit confused with the target of 25 and then the range of 15 to 35, understanding that, or thinking that it was just a correction if we drift away from 25, but it's really not. Or clarify this. It's a little bit more of an allowance for a investment strategy mix. Midterm, you know, of course, more equity is more opportunity, but more risk. So midterm, we could go lower. Long-term, we can go higher mix. But to keep it all in control, combine the two, and we should be at 25. Is that the intent?
Yeah, so what the intent is, I would say that what you actually said first is probably more of the intent, which is, so equities are only appropriate for long-term. So say if you looked at this and what the modeling, say the modeling indicated that, and remember, these are net numbers as well. So they're net of your short-term needs are net of the inflows. So outflows are, you know, you look at it and you think, well, we've got so much going out. Yes, but we have lots coming in as well. So over this 5-year period, what the long-term plan shows us is we need $2 million over 5 years. That's what it shows us, the net outflow over those years based on, so that bucket is minimum $2 million. You look at what the next bucket is, so now you take the next 5 years, which is not presented to us, but we have a 30-year plan. So that's the next year, and I can't tell you exactly how much it is, but it is probably in that same $2 to $5 million, right? So what that means is between $2 and $5 million in the first two buckets each is kind of a maximum of 10. It means your long-term bucket is 20 million. And as I said, 25% is 7.5 million. So equities are only appropriate for that long-term piece, and we are at 25% are well within the amount that falls in that bucket. The range is really to give you some flexibility, but there is a target in there for a reason. The target is what we are striving to meet. That is what you are looking at. But the range allows you on both the upside and the downside that you have some flexibility in terms of rebalancing over a period of time. Right now at the 10%, and I watched an early presentation that Cap Trust did for us, and they were, pointed out we're not exactly at 10%, we're at like 10.05%. It was some ridiculously small amount, but it also showed that really we have to, a range gives them and us some ability to manage within that so that you're not constantly focused on, oh, I've got to get back to 25%. If you have a market that's going down, you might want to put some, but it also allows you not to do it immediately. In a market that's hot, it gives you some time to rebalance. So it's really, and most portfolios balance on a regular schedule. Once a year, twice a year, something like that. And so it just, that the range really gives you some flexibility within a performance period to rebalance at a regular time as opposed to monthly rebalancing.
Gives a little bit more room for discretion.
It does.
And that's, it's, that could be good or it could be bad, but it's something that we talked about, and it might take a little bit of developing a comfort level around that. Although I hate to bring it up, look at what's been happening this month. Or not look, if you're like, like most of us, right? But that's an extraordinary event that, let's hope, that's not a regular occurrence, but the range, arranged this wide, allows you to ride out that kind of an extraordinary event to a certain extent. And take and take advantage of it.
Yes, that is correct.
Chris, did that help? Did it answer?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
That's, I guess my only concern moving forward is, since this is a policy that's going to be reviewed, is that, there's potential in in the future, for future committees and governing
Mhm.
boards to change that number 25, change the number 15, right? And that's
Absolutely.
their right to do so. So, you know, I guess because I'm in favor of this policy recommendation. So, you know, I'm hoping that it stays that way for a while and that it stays there, but there's nothing really stopping people from changing it in the future.
There is not, and that's both that's how our association is structured, right? And it's what we're building into the policy is this definition of, you know, or statements around, hey, you know, one of the key things we've kept our focus on being prudent and so forth, but also saying the focus is on a long-term view, right? The best way that we can look at this is that we continue, with the help of this working group, and the entire committee, we've opened up a topic that's very, very important to all of us as owner members. But what this requires now is a constant renewal of that knowledge, building that muscle, and we'll start with or be retained first through the governing board, which by design turns over every year. At least 1/3 of that board turns over every year. And this really will come both from the governing board and future committees. Every year, by our bylaws, we review every single policy, right? So it's very important. So it's both, and we've all, you know, we've gone back and forth on this. We certainly don't want to change that, but yes, we have to recognize there is an opportunity, and there should be an opportunity for review and change.
Sure. I mean, it's just looking at different people have different views of their own personal finances, right? So I think all this conversation will be healthy. I encourage people to bring up their opinion, and you know, it's a good conversation to have.
Yeah, it's been a great conversation. You know, hats off to the entire committee and to the working group for driving it. So, David, what are your insights or comments on
Sure.
this?
First of all, thanks for the work for the three of you who have done this. I know that there's been a lot of time invested in this, and thank you. Your presentation's also been very helpful along the way. I have no questions or concerns with anything in what I call the horizon categories or the asset allocation classes. I'm fine. I'm very comfortable with that. You opened the door up a second ago. I was waiting. Maybe I didn't know the proper time to bring this up, but I wanted to bring up that there should not. I'm concerned. No, not concerned. I raised the question as the thoughts about having some language on how often rebalancing should be considered, because I don't want someone in this committee every month doing it every time there's a presentation on a rebalancing, or what would trigger a rebalancing. So, you know, and I'm just curious your thoughts upon that, having some language of that in here.
So here's what I would say about that, is that we always have to remember that we are policy, not operations. And I think that falls under operations and is in the purview of our general manager and our CFO. However, I think that their guidance to Cap Trust and in conversations, because Cap Trust doesn't invest our funds with no guidance from us. They are looking for feedback and guidance. And I think that rebalancing will be, how often you do that should be part of their plan, their strategic plan, to Cliff and the finance team and our GM. That should be part of their plan to them. That's actually laid out how often it happens.
Yeah, I think they'll build that strategy in their IPS. So when we look at the IPS, we'll have some more clarity on and what that is, and we'll have an opportunity at that point in time to talk about that. But this will help build that IPS, and that's really the operational tool they use to manage the account.
Thanks.
No, I feel comfortable. I agree with you that this should be a management type of thing, but I just want to make sure there's somewhere along the line that we know what that is and we see what that is, so we know what the terms or parameters in which they're working.
We do have that from Cap Trust, I believe. I'm trying to remember the current IPS. But we could certainly, we have the opportunity every month, formally here, twice a month, actually, through the Budget and Finance, but we have, through Cliff and the rest of the team, we could ask those questions about were there any rebalancing and what was that? But we do have the statements every month. Is it in the IPS?
Yes, I mean, the directive is 10%, so it's not, they'll do that at the problem is with the hard, fast line, it could change on a daily basis. We don't know. So what I would say is that they do present currently at quarterly what type of moves have, so to speak, have been made within the portfolio, if there was a rebalancing or what the impact of that was. So, but yeah, we do currently report that on a quarterly basis. But if there was going to be more moves, I could see a need to specifically present that. But I believe the idea is to have less moves. So to create, to give us more flexibility so that they're not mandated to do it on a hard number,
Right.
10%.
And I realize that you mentioned it about more, you're describing the asset allocation, rebalancing, but I think also we'd want to make sure we have how often we rebalance the horizon categories, which are really the short term, medium term, and long term. How often we do that? And that's obviously the management. You come to us with that recommendation, but that should be somewhere that we understand that is being done on a regular basis.
Yeah, so I would point to 3.1 where it says, that's why it calls out all reserve funds are included in that range. So flexibility within all of those funds to hit those range targets and is really the management of the account. I think it's less tied to specifically short-term, medium-term, long-term, and more in terms of the complete portfolio. And I think we really need to make this clear. There's going to be valuation changes and there's going to be realized and unrealized losses simply due to the fact that when we book a gain, we book it as an unrealized gain. If we realize that gain, the offset on the books is to unrealized, becomes realized, and the offset is to unrealized. So we're booking them monthly on a monthly basis, and then if there's a sell, for example, and there's a realized gain, the offset of that is going to be to unrealized losses because we booked it as an unrealized gain. So then it's just a book change, but we're booking those losses and gains monthly.
But in terms of your specific comment about the buckets, that's an annual, right? That is an annual plan. So every year you go through as part of the budget. The budget includes this 5-year plan that we see, but it also includes a full evaluation of the 30 years of the reserve, right? So it includes a 30-year plan. So that is the basis, right, for what's in each bucket, right? We don't necessarily, what we've seen is the 5-year piece of it. But when I did my modeling, when I looked at all the models, I was looking at the 30-year plan, right? That's what and so that is that annual planning piece encompasses both the current year operating budget and capital plan, the 5-year plan that we are going to use for this short term, and a 30-year plan that really tells us where everything else falls. And that's done every year.
And we just saw that, again, earlier in this meeting, right? We saw the 5-year part of the plan. Every year, this was one of the questions that came from Cap Trust, actually. Where's that number going to come from? And every year we set forth a budget with new targets for how much it is in that short-term fund. So they're going to be held, they have to measure that, right? They have to come back to us with reporting that enables us as a committee, and the governing board overall needs to be able to monitor adherence to the policy. So the onus is on them to come up with the reporting that allows us to make sure they're doing this. Does that help?
It's just that there's gonna be fluctuations, and I don't want every time there's this fluctuation, let's say for an expenditure, you pay out a lot of a particular one of those categories, that we're gonna be back here trying to redo things. I think that long-term strategic planning includes this type of structure and latitude to do the management that you have to do, but also for us as a board and a committee, that is, I guess, the committee here being able to understand what is happening.
So here's the other thing, because this question actually just came up when we were finalizing, right? So we're finalizing the language of this. It came up. And so what we were looking at is the 5-year plan shows us that we have 2 million need short-term over 5 years. However, what if something changes in that period of time, right? So, which happens every single year. Things get brought forward, things get pushed out. And so so in addition, so what we're saying, that 5-year bucket, that is at minimum. You have to have at least that. This plan gives you the flexibility from a management perspective to also have a piece in there that says, well, we actually think that things might move around a little bit, and so we need 15%. So 15% would be $4.5 million. That should be kept very liquid, right? So this policy gives you the flexibility to address changing needs.
Thanks.
A bit, yeah. Thanks, David. Ed?
Yeah, I guess when I look at any policy, I kind of put my binoculars on to look at it from the 30,000-foot range. And you have to be a little more open about it versus the final specifics to make this happen. So I tend to think that this is really what we need to do, and really the circle that has been done to give it the overall thing. And I see that it's a little bit bigger than what we had, but I think that's good because everything varies. I remember Cap Trust saying, hey, we're all, like you said, 10.01, what are we going to do? And that's not the way to steer the ship. So very happy with this policy from that viewpoint.
Thanks for that. So far, great discussion. I heard an opportunity for more changes, but the changes I've scribed down that are quick would be in 3.01, the second bullet point under 3.01, to make sure that the financial plan described in FY15 to make the letter I a lowercase I. The second, and I did hear what you're saying about making 3.1 a table. Super idea, but it isn't something we can do on the fly here, unfortunately, but it is a super idea. Moving to 3.1.4, we agree, I believe we agreed, the suggestion was made to add the phrase "as defined above" at the end of that sentence. So the 3.1.4 would read, all reserve funds shall be invested in a variety of fixed income and equities as defined above. Those are the changes that I heard to verbiage that we discussed. Did I miss anything?
An alternative to a table, because I didn't necessarily think about a table, but I thought that the common term that we have been using is short-term, mid-term, and long-term, and they are in the bullet points, but they're at the end in parentheses. I feel like they should be at the beginning of the bullet point with the definition of those three terms to follow, instead of the definition followed by the term, right? Currently, it's the definition followed by the term, and I feel like that it would be easier to read with the word short-term, net short-term capital, semicolon, which means this, right? Midterm, which means this, long-term, which means That'd be my suggestion. It's just an idea.
I apologize. I think that's a good suggestion.
And I apologize too for pointing at you. That's so rude. But, okay. I think, again, would everybody be okay? And at least it gets us a little clearer. I do like the table idea, but say, for each of those items that are in parens, to move those to the start of the bullet, followed by a colon. Everybody okay with that? I do agree that that would be, that makes things a bit more clear. Jim, what do you think?
Yeah, I like that idea. That's fair. I'm going to throw in one more thing. For whatever reason, this is the only policy document that I've come across that is laden with bullet points. All of our other ones have a number structure. I might throw in to itemize it A, B, C, D, or whatever as well, rather than bullet point. That's it.
One of the things that we've struggled with, and we're going to come back to the rest of the policy too. We've earlier in the year we struggled with reformatting a lot of our policies, because if we start doing that, is it else? Let me just take a look. If it's elsewhere, we do have other sub-bullets, and again, the idea was to try to maintain that same structure. I hear what you're saying. I'd suggest that we, for the purposes of this policy revision, we keep to the bullets underneath the numbers, although, to be fair, everybody, including everybody else, including the council that's looked at this, has said the exact same thing. Like, what's with the bullets and the numbers? So it is something that we could make a little bit clearer going forward, but thank you, Jim, for that. We'll keep the bullets for now, since there are other areas of the policy that would have to change to a document that would have to change to align. So, with that, I'm going to open it up to questions from any of the residents who are here, just on section, and we're looking just at section 3, as well as that small portion. I think I already asked for questions on 2.1. So we'll keep questions, comments to section 3, investment of funds. We do have a couple of questions that came in online then, so maybe this will prompt others to get up. But let's see. So Gary Bach, 135435. Will these changes affect what Cap Trust charges? The answer, we did ask them, and the answer is no. How much of reserve funds, same Gary Bach, 135435. How much of reserve funds are we thinking will fall into each category, short, medium, and long term? We just had Mickey, when she was explaining to the rest of the committee, actually gave a back of the envelope, top of mind idea. Hopefully that answered the question for you. If not, I know you're hearing these words a little bit after the answer, so just put another question in and we can clarify at the end of the meeting if necessary, or try to. Still no questions in the room? So let's look at, does the committee have any other points or concerns? You heard the direction that I, as one of the advisors, as well as the governing board overall, had given the direction to the working group to keep the amount of changes to this policy to as minimum as possible, so that we could really stay focused on the nuts and bolts of the investment policy change. But that being said, I hope that you understand why they looked at the entire policy. I was there when they did this, did not see anything other than that section of 2.1 that warranted an immediate change. They could live with, as I recall, the rest of the policy stood as written for this go-around. But anyone on the committee have any other input or questions, concerns about the remainder of the policy as it pertains to the changes we're talking about?
The other ones I'll swallow, but this one I'm kind of coughing up. 4.2.1.
Okay, what's the,
This committee shall strive to achieve a wise investment strategy with blah, 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 blah.
Ah.
Who's this committee?
I'm reading 4.2 to see if it's defined there. Investments of the capital. 4.2 refers to the CFO and the Budget and Finance Committee. So let's look at it. Investments of the capital project funds shall be managed by a professional investment advisory firm. Professional investment advisory firm shall report portfolio performance quarterly to the CFO and Budget and Finance Committee. And then it would go on to say, this committee shall strive to achieve a wise investment strategy with consideration of the following.
And I assumed it was a Budget and Finance Committee, and I recommend that we spell it out.
Anyone have a concern with that, making that change? That's a simple clarification, Jim. And you're right, I had to read the whole thing to make sure I understood it myself, so. Any other changes or insights from the rest of the committee or from any residents? Then Mickey or Rick, as the members of the working group, would you formulate a recommendation for us that we forward this to the governing board with the changes we've described today?
I so recommend.
Thank you. So the same verbiage as we've used before. You can either agree or object to that recommendation. So made by committee member Mickey Jacobs. So Mickey, we're going to start with Ed, since you already gave the recommendation. And again, the words, if you wouldn't mind, please, would be agree or object to forwarding this.
Agree.
Agreed.
Agree.
Agree?
Agreed.
And agreed.
And Mickey? Although we understand what you're saying.
Agreed.
Oh, very good. So the recommendation is made to forward this to the governing board. Governing board will take this up at its next workshop rather than at our next meeting, so that the governing board can discuss this, have time to review it. Please, I did get some good feedback, and I want to make sure that I'm adhering to that feedback. I expect that the working group will meet with governing board directors at their request over the next few weeks. The workshop we're talking about is on May the 9th. So as a working group session comes up, should that be scheduled, I'll make sure to the committee that you're all aware of that working group session, if any are called, to review some of the verbiage and to listen to some of that. Also be aware that at that same workshop scheduled for May 9th, Cap Trust will be in attendance to answer questions about how this could be implemented. And any other questions. So just be aware, that's a good one to get on the Budget and Finance Committee calendar. I think it will be a really good discussion. Of course, the working group members will be there, but I encourage all of you to attend or participate. It's a team effort. So again, many thanks. Not too bad. So that concludes 3.04 and it concludes all of our new business. We'll move on now to 4.01, committee comments. We'll start with you, Ed.
I've worked in the corporate environment for 35 years, so I understand P&L type comments. My aha moment was like 3 years ago when I realized you can't really use those metrics with this type of organization. So I've had to have that change of hat, and based on that change of hat, I think that we are doing a good job in creating an environment that meets, quote unquote, the Del Webb standard, which I have a problem understanding that, but I do have a better appreciation, and I think that this budget goes a long way in meeting those requirements.
Thank you for those comments. Rick, any comments?
I have no comments at this point.
David?
I believe I'm correct, Carl. This will be our last meeting with you in this role. I just wanted to tell, I know you're sitting up there, but I just wanted to tell you thank you to your contributions over at least my time on this board, but I know to the whole organization and the community. So again, thank you for your services.
And immediately following, Carl will be in the audience as a resident, so watch out. Thank you for that. Chris?
I'm, yeah, I feel real comfortable with the budget that we're looking at moving forward. I probably feel most comfortable with it because I've followed it step by step by step. We've asked a lot of questions, and other people at other meetings have asked questions, and that's what makes me feel comfortable for it. And then as far as the FY12 that we just went through, I think that it's making it could make a big difference for Sun City West community, and I'm glad to see it happen. I feel like we have we've owned a tool, which is our long-term cash that we have. We've owned a tool, and we didn't use it to our advantage, and we're starting to think about using it to our advantage. So I thank the working group for that.
Thank you. John, any comments?
Yeah, I'll just duplicate what Chris said. As far as the budget process, end result was very good, and just a huge appreciation to the Committee on Investments for all the time. It's a great improvement. I had two thoughts. One was just a reminder to the committee. I think early in our process, we made a goal not to wordsmith because we knew we had so much work to do, but we said that maybe in our next go around that we would do a better job of that. So I think this concludes our review of all our policies, but we're going to start again here in a few months. So, and then I also want to remind David's recommendation that potentially our policies are all in one document, and that we would look at that at some time. So two things that we deferred but could take up in the near future.
Excellent reminder. It's something, again, we have time between now and June to really put a finer point on some of those recommendations for what happens going forward. Policies are reviewed every year, and you are absolutely correct, John. That is the decision of this committee to move forward for this year. Thank you. Jim?
Yeah, I kind of third John and Chris. I think it's been an enlightening experience. I see a lot of hard work going into this from the rec department, and I see things from a totally different lens. I can't encourage folks enough to attend and be involved to understand the bigger picture. And I guess finally, I think we all join the committee to make a difference. And I think I'm going home today with this new and improved policy with the investment strategy, knowing that we made a difference in our tenure. Thank you.
And we're not even done yet, but yes, everything that the committee's done, I completely agree. I'm glad that you feel that way. Mickey?
So this has been a very enlightening year for me, as having been in the community for not that long, for 5 years. This has been really enlightening. And the other thing that I really appreciate, and this goes to you, Christine, is this committee operates with a level of professionalism that I really appreciate. There are no questions that are off limits. Everyone is encouraged to be very open. I think that we have done a very good job of review. And I am, as I've said before, I am most impressed with the financial functioning of our organization. I think you can nitpick on certain little things, but it's also been, when it's made clear that we are really looking at this from an amenity standpoint, I think that has helped a lot from my perspective, because I also came out of a corporate environment, and I can remember looking at pieces of it and saying, well, how come that doesn't break even? Well, the reason it doesn't break even is that it wasn't designed to break even. It was designed to benefit the community. And so, for example, people take a look at golf and they're like, well, golf, that's $1 million. Well, take a look at the pools and the rec centers, and that's $1 million. That, I think, was helpful for us to say, we in this community are doing it for the benefit of our members, to the best of our ability, to keep it reasonably priced and yet very high quality, very high quality. So I am very impressed. I'm really glad I did this. And like I said, I also appreciate, I've watched other committees, and I am very impressed with the civility and professionalism of this committee.
Well, thanks for that. I am as well. And I'm always struck by, it's such a volunteer community, Sun City West. And all of us on the committees, as well as the governing board, we all serve as volunteers. I think all of you would agree that there have been many times this committee has not felt like a volunteer role, right? A lot of time and effort goes into reading all these documents. And the level of not only professionalism, but the level of detail and scrutiny that you guys have put into every single thing put before you is really to your credit. And the one thing that I contributed, if you will, is that I took those 50 some odd applicants that were interested in serving on a committee. I took every single one of those 50 some odd that were interested in budget and finance, and I invited them to meet with me. And I met 8 new people I did not know prior. And I'm very grateful for everybody who volunteered. I'm very grateful to all of you for serving. And I just keep reminding you, like, you're not done. A big part of our reviews are done, but we do have some time to put a finer point on things and to take some credit. So, to take some possible improvements up as well. So, but thank you again for all of that. And so the 3 things that I wanted to add, first of all, was to anyone who's here or listening, and tell your friends that the application process for serving on the next year of all committees, not just this one, is wide open. If you're not sure how to apply for that, you can look it up on the website or call our office, and our governing board assistant, Karen Wopkin, will be happy to walk you through it. The second thing is Cliff and his team will be leading budget forums on April the 23rd and April the 24th. The 23rd is in the morning, I believe. I had to look it up. That's why I was on my phone a moment ago. I wanted to make sure I got them right. 9 a.m. right here. And then for those of you who are working or are just too busy out there enjoying our facilities during the day, we'll also have an evening one on the 24th, right? So please take the time to come and hear the details. In more details, tell your friends as well. So that's coming up. And again, I amplify and thank, I can't thank Carl Wilhelm enough for all his contributions. Everybody on the staff works very hard, but seeing his smiling face in the audience is always something that we look forward to, and having his expertise as we consider all of these. How you were able to keep hundreds of details and projects in your head at that level of detail, I will never really understand, but I will always be grateful for. So, so for all those years, I've been a member of Budget and Finance since the fall of 2022, and I always stand in awe. Thanks for that, Carl. We'll miss you, and we'll see you out on the courts, I'm sure. And last but not least, again, I can't thank all of you enough, and remember to try to put some of the future meetings on your calendars as well. So with that, we open it up. Any questions, any further questions or comments from our residents, owner residents, or anyone else? And there are none online. So our next meeting of Budget and Finance is May the 6th, 9 a.m. right here. Thank you so much, and we'll see you there.